On August 26th of 1980, I was in my late 20s and I got word while I was working for the newspaper in Reno, Nevada. I got called around. I made my rounds. That's what police reporters do. And I called all the police agencies. And when I called the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, they gave me some pretty interesting news. They said, well, there's a bomb up at the lake, a suspected bomb up at Harvey's at Lake Tahoe, and we don't know what it is yet. It could be a bomb, but we just don't know. The FBI might be even showing up to investigate. We're unsure. This is a curious situation. Well, it wasn't curious to me. I knew that if something was going on, I had to get up there right away because I worked for the biggest local news agency. It was a mid-sized paper with a circulation of, I'd say maybe 60,000 to 100,000. It was based in Reno, Nevada, and it was a 1 hour drive to Lake Tahoe. And I told my bosses at the newspaper, something's going on at the lake. I got to get up there. I don't know what but I just don't know. I got to get up there. So I got out to my car, zoom, zoom, zoom. I drove as fast as I could. I was usually, I was a I drove like an old grandpa in those days. I didn't drive very fast, but boy, that day I drove faster than usual, right straight through Carson City, Nevada, which is about 30 miles south of Reno, the state capital. At that time, there was no big highway going around Carson City like there is today. I had to go through stop and go traffic to get through Carson City, but I had to get up there to the lake. Nobody knew exactly what was going on, but I knew I had to get to the scene. So, what did I do? Zoom, 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 right up, I think it was called Interstate 50, all the way up from Carson City area, from the southern edge of Carson, way up to the Lake Tahoe. It was in the Sierra range, of course, and I drove around Lake Tahoe. I drove around the east side of Lake Tahoe as fast as I could. Actually, I broke probably quite a few driving laws. And then when I got up there, I was attempting to go right into the Harvey's casino as soon as I could. I got closed my car, locked my car. Wow, okay, no, we're not letting you in. We're not letting you in. Nobody can let in. They were evacuating. The building had been evacuated by the time I got there. As soon as I knew the building had been evacuated, I knew this was a potential story. Maybe it was some kind of a fake bomb. Maybe it was a hoax. You know how those things are. But I had to play it safe. I had to play it like it was an actual event. So what I did is I went across the street from Harvey's kitty corner, catter corner, however you say it, and I went down to a casino called Caesars. And I was a low-paid reporter at that time. I didn't have hardly any money of my own, but I knew that I had to be there. I had to be on the scene, on the spot, to do the job that needed to be done in case this was indeed a bomb. If it was that big of a bomb, it probably had to be big enough to force the officials to evacuate the casino. So what did I do? I pulled out my American Express card. And what was the saying at that time? The advertisement, I think the guy's name was Carl Malden. Don't leave with home without it. Well, I didn't leave home without it. Plop, I plopped my American Express card down, and I didn't regret it to that moment. I got a big suite up there. I just knew that this was going to be something. If this was going to be something, I wasn't sure, but I got a giant suite. I never did this kind of thing in my adult life at that time because I wasn't a wealthy man, as you can imagine. I didn't have hardly any money. But I had to be prepared, and I have to get my newspaper colleagues prepared. I had to make sure everything was in a workable situation so that we could be on the spot in case this was something very big. And then I called from my hotel room. I called the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, and that was the Nevada jurisdiction. We were in the state of Nevada. That's where the casinos were, of course, where legalized casino gambling was going on. It was a big portion of the state economy. And I called the Sheriff's Department. They go, yes, we're seeing that this looks like a bomb, and we're not sure yet. This could be a pretty big thing. So they didn't give me any details, but what did I do? Called my newspaper, talked to my big bosses, and I said, we got something going on here. I got a room that I rented, and I recommend that you send a crew. Now, a crew would be of my various associates, a photographer, and I think they sent about 6 or 8 reporters to accompany me. And so here I am. It was my first year at it was called the Reno Evening Gazette that I worked at that time, and its sister newspaper was called the Nevada State Journal. Both newspapers, although theoretically kind of competing against each other, the Reno Evening Gazette, Nevada State Journal, they had different staffers, but both papers sent reporters there. Some reporters I was more familiar with, I knew, and I explained to them when they arrived, well, this is, this is, I don't know what it was. I was honest with everybody. I said, well, I don't know what the heck's going on. And so my bosses down in Reno said, do what you need to do. Pay for what you need to pay. Make sure everybody's happy and just do what you need to do to make everybody. So this wasn't a big news organization in the sense that wasn't ABC News, CBS News, blah, blah, blah. And as far as I knew, those big news agencies, they weren't even there yet. We were the first big agency. And we were associated with what was called the Gannett Newspapers Group, Nevada Gannett Incorporated. And it was, at the time, the largest newspaper chain in the United States. And so we had all those newspapers that we were feeding stories to, and we were kind of big, and we had something called USA Today, which was called the nation's newspaper. So we had those folks, and that was part of the Gannett system. So the USA Today at that time was only like, it was just starting. I believe it was in the process of starting at that time. It wasn't quite, it was just either shortly after that, but the newspaper, the USA Today, was something that was in its birthing stage. It was about to come out. So here we were. And we were, as far as I know, I might be wrong, the first to have all kinds of a crew there. And I was assigned as the main reporter there. And I don't take all the credit. In fact, I give another reporter much more credit than I give myself in this regard. And I'm going to discuss that gentleman a little bit later here. But anyway, gosh almighty, as the sun rose the next day, we knew that we were on something, and we had to hop on the proverbial pony and ride around the racetrack. And there was no racetrack and there was no pony, but we need to be there for the story. We need to have the crew ready to go, and I was ready to do my share to help make that happen before the bomb blew. Well, as you can very well imagine, I was standing in the parking lot of the Caesars Hotel Casino, more than, say 150 to 200 yards away from the photo that you see on the screen, the image you see on the screen of the Harveys as it just blew to smithereens. And wow, it was just all over the place, as you can see. Well, I was standing right next to the photographers, and right before the explosion, you could hear the countdown, and I heard it. We all knew that this building was going to blow. And there was a countdown, and everyone heard it. Everyone had been told to stay away from the explosion zone, to stay away from where you could potentially be harmed. You see the images of the automobiles in the parking lot over there? Well, that's those folks who own those vehicles couldn't even get to their vehicles because police had and authorities, the FBI, everybody involved, all the police investigators, whatever, they cleared off the entire scene for safety reasons. And we could hear the countdown 10, 9, and so on. And the anticipation grew, as you could very well imagine, to 1. Boom! And you can, after the explosion died down, the sound of the explosion, the cheers from the crowd, I can still hear those cheers in my mind to this very day. And they cheered because the building had gone down, the danger was over, and everyone prayed at that point that no one could be injured. No one was injured. And that actually turned out to be the case. Amazingly, not a single injury was reported as a result of this. And that's quite interesting. So, as you can imagine, there was a mad rush of reporters, and the reporters just rushed to the site across the street where they amassed on the sidewalk across the street from the explosion zone. And what I've always learned, this was my first year at the Reno newspapers. As I previously indicated, a lot of my viewers already know I worked for 19 months at a newspaper in Florida before I came to Reno to work for this particular newspaper. So this was my first year at the Reno newspaper. In fact, this explosion occurred exactly 1 week after my international story went global on Frank Sinatra and President John F. Kennedy, and I have done another video on that, but that occurred 1 week after that particular event. That was, according to historians that follow the news, that month of August of 1980 was a huge news month in the United States. There were so many events that were particularly interesting to the public, and I just happened to be a lead reporter in two of these reports. And there I was. Essentially, I wasn't a rookie at that point, but I was just starting out. And what happened was, as I say, all these reporters, they ran for the news cameras, ABC News, NBC, you name it, they were all there. Newspaper reporters everywhere. They were converging at a press conference. And a press conference was, I thought some of my colleagues from the Reno newspapers might be going there. But what I've always learned, what I've always understood, and a practice that I always maintained throughout my journalistic career, and later when I became a prolific ghostwriter of dozens of books, you don't go in the obvious path, you go in the opposite direction. That's the best way to get the real information. You want to just listen to somebody talk into a microphone and everybody, all the other reporters have the exact same information? Well, that was not my style. What I did is I scoped out the region and I went behind a parking lot way far away from the reporters, far away from the police officials, FBI officials, whoever they were, given this so-called press conference, and I went around to the other side of Harrah's Hotel Casino, which was across the street from Harvey's, and I found a little trailer, and I found out that that was the command post for this whole event. And I got some interviews and I got some insider information by just don't follow the crowd. And that's sometimes that's the way to go. Why follow everybody else? I got some critical information and I took it from there. As you might very well imagine, the moment the sun rose the following morning on the day of the explosion, August 27th of 1980, remember I was in my late 20s by that time, and so this has been almost 50 years ago, but it's kind of interesting for me to recall all these events because they had such a great impact on the entire community and on my life as well, and also on the FBI, as I've been mentioning, changed the investigation techniques. It was a real learning experience for the investigators. But as you might imagine, the moment the sun rose up, all of my colleagues and myself, we all scattered in different directions to get the news. We didn't stick together in one little pack. We scattered and collected the news as best we could, collected details about the unfolding event. So what happened was we worked all day long doing our various things. I went through the casinos and looked, and I noticed that there was a lot of gambling still going on. People were still gambling in the casinos that were nearby. Of course, there was the Sahara across the street from the Caesars where I had stayed with my colleagues, and I was unable to get across the street to the Sahara. Oh, and by the way, the Sahara is the last Northern Nevada casino that Elvis Presley performed in when he was still young and vibrant in the early 70s. So this bombing happened, gosh, holy, about 7 or 8 years after Elvis had performed in the Sahara, which was immediately to the I believe, the south of Harvey. So, but of course, the Sahara was not damaged, but I couldn't get across the street to investigate, see what was going on at the Sahara because authorities had blocked off the street, so nobody could walk across the street. But I was able to go through the casino where we were staying. People were still playing cards, gambling all day long. And we also ventured up to the Harrah's, which was on the same side of the street as Caesar's. And at Harrah's casino, people were still gambling all throughout the day as if nothing was going on. This is what gambling is all about. Holy cow, people, they get hooked on it. In fact, according to some reports in the casinos, including the Sahara, Caesars, and Harrah's, people were betting on when the actual explosion would occur. And they were betting supposedly on whether anybody would be killed or injured. Oh gosh, this is a little bit bizarre, but anyway, I wanted to tell you about I worked all day long, of course, gathering information as I had previously indicated, but the day seemed to drag on, even though we were all so busy. There was tension. There was tension in the air among those of us who were particularly gathering the news. We knew something horrendous was on the horizon. The FBI didn't necessarily release all the specific details, neither did the local law enforcement, including the Nevada officials, Nevada investigators. And so, but the word was spreading around. It was kind of a bit of rumor, so to speak, but some of it might have been a little bit accurate that the bomb was going to blow. But by, I'd say, around 2 o'clock-ish that afternoon, it was still, it was pretty much a bright, sunny day. There were not a lot of clouds, and the breeze was very minimal, as I recall. So word came out officially around, I would say, 2 o'clock-ish, and definitely by 3 o'clock, the word spread that that this was official, that the bomb was going to blow. There was no getting around it. Now, the FBI was going to attempt to disarm the bomb by cutting into the device, but when doing so, it was assumed that this thing was going to blow. And of course, it did. As you can imagine, that's what we've already said. But so this was on a Wednesday, August 27th, 1980, almost 50 years ago, about 46 years ago. Time keeps marching on, of course. And it blew at 3:43 in full daylight hours, and everybody was able to see, everybody who was outside to witness the thing, they were there to see exactly what went on. It was daylight, the crowds were watching from all over the place, and it was really a spectacle. Now, the countdown and the cheering afterwards, because people just thought it was a great celebration. Why would people cheer at such an event? But that's exactly what happened. To most folks, this thing was a giant celebration. And why were the crowds watching in the first place? Well, once the casino was evacuated, word spread quickly around the state line area that the casino, of course, was evacuated the previous day, but all the other casinos, people got out on the streets. And by afternoon, law enforcement had cleared the immediate area around the Harveys, and so it was past high noon. It wasn't high noon, but it was past high noon. But we all know that there was going to be a proverbial shootout. Now, nobody knew on the streets exactly where these suspects were, but the FBI was definitely doing everything that they could to track these culprits down. But so, like I say, law enforcement had cleared the area, but many people gathered further away, to keep watching and from a safe distance. As I previously indicated, I think I was I don't know the exact distance. It was probably 100 yards, maybe 150, 125 yards away from the Harvey's building complex, and I was next to a whole ton of the photographers that snapped the shots that you've been seeing here, the still shots, not the movie versions that we've seen. And uh, people also watch from the parking lot of other nearby hotels and from their hotel rooms. They just looked out the windows of their hotels. This was like in a way, it was a circus-like atmosphere. Human beings, well, what we do, I don't know. So anyway, like I indicated, there was a countdown. People were watching from safe distances, and debris just flew all over the place through the air. Some people describe seeing like furniture tumbling out of the various floors of the Harveys, and debris flew all in all directions throughout the air. And what actually triggered the explosion was the FBI used a C4 shaped charge to try to separate detonators from the dynamite. They believed that the detonator wiring could be disabled and mean explosives would still remain, but they were very knowledgeable that this thing likely was going to go, which of course it did. Now, what the blast looked like, eyewitnesses, and I can verify some of this on my own, being an actual eyewitness to the event. The descriptions matched what I saw, and that was there was a massive cloud of debris. Floors were tumbling down, and they were tumbling inward. The casino chips and furniture kept flying through the air. Furniture, casino chips. Casino chips are little circular, firm objects that casinos use when people are betting on table games. They'll have these chips, and you'll have a chip that's like a $25 chip, a $50 chip. So essentially, this was like money blowing through the air. And I don't know if anybody picked up the chips. Who knows? Maybe some lucky folks got out and scooped up the chips. I don't know. I never saw any stories about what happened with that, but it was in nearby buildings, supposedly near Lake Tahoe. Some buildings apparently blew out, and here's why nobody was injured, because the evacuation worked extremely well. Authorities cleared the entire casino, nearby buildings, and they connected the tunnel to Harrah's. You know, there was a tunnel underneath the street from Harrah's over to the Harvey's for convenience sake for people. Zero injuries, zero fatalities, and it's a pretty interesting thing. Now, one thing that might be mentioned is, as I might have indicated, you know, this occurred exactly 10 days, the explosion, after I broke a global story on my own. Nobody else did it. And you can see that in one of my other videos if you just look through my videos here. And that involved Frank Sinatra and President John Kennedy. Pretty interesting story. And that month of August of 1980 historically was one of the biggest news months in years, or supposedly. And the two stories that I did were very pivotal in that whole thing. Television recordings of the bombings went worldwide, as you can very well imagine. The films were magnetic that the various TV stations took, and these inspired and ignited the imagination of the public everywhere around the world. People were just fascinated by this story. They were gripped by the idea that everybody could have been put in so much danger in one specific area at one certain time during a specific event. Wow, boom, boom, boom. And of course, they had the sound effects in those television broadcasts that really brought the whole scene to life, just as you can very well imagine. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, it was a pretty horrific situation all around. This photo captures the image of a rarely seen image of FBI agents as they begin to approach the rubble of Harvey's moments after the blast. And they entered the emergency area along with other law enforcement and emergency personnel. And when they got in, right away they faced collapsed floors and walls, massive piles of concrete, steel, and casino debris, thick dust and smoke filling the interior, broken glass scattered throughout the gaming floor. The blast created a huge crater through several floors of the building, exposing structural beams and interior rooms. Well, who entered first? Well, the first outfit that entered was of course, the FBI agents, the bomb squad technicians, local police firefighters, and structural engineers. Their immediate goals were to confirm no secondary bomb was present, check for injured or trapped people, and to begin documenting the scene for the official investigation. Now, of course, there was a remarkable outcome that I previously discussed, but what they also found among the debris, they eventually recovered fragments of bomb casings, wiring and electrical components, detonator pieces, evidence that helped confirm the device was built by James Burgess. These materials were used to reconstruct how the bomb had been designed and why it had been so difficult to disarm. Right here, I'm about to show you a brief video that was produced by the FBI recounting the whole situation. Take a look at this. It's pretty interesting.
Harvey's bomb was probably, for me, the biggest event or the biggest bombing case I was ever involved with. As the case developed, we came to know that John Burgess Sr. was the principal person involved in this case, along with his two sons, two other accomplices, and his girlfriend. He needed money. His restaurant business was failing. It was an extortion to get money to save his business. He chose Harvey's Casino because he had lost money there. He said in this very involved letter that the device could not be disabled or moved, and that if the demand was met, he would give instructions as to how to disable the bomb. This device was a pretty sophisticated, quite complicated piece of machinery, unlike anything we'd ever seen before or anybody in the bomb disposal business had ever seen before. What we know about it afterwards is that it virtually was undefeatable. There were 8 fusing systems, as it turned out. Their timer simply was one of them. The anti-motion switch was another. The float mechanism was another. The device was enclosed in a metal box, and the lid of the box was secured by some flat head screws around the perimeter of the lid. Those screws were attached to wires and contacts so that if they were removed, that would detonate the device. There were layers of rubber and metal on the inside of the metal box, so that if an entry was attempted, a drilling or some inspection entry was made, that contact would function the bomb. When I got out there and got the full story, it was reported that somewhere in the middle of the night, these fellas delivered this bomb on a cart or a dolly, rolled it into the casino main floor, and into an elevator, and took it up to the administrative offices with a cover over it that said IBM, and it was ostensibly a delivery of a piece of office equipment. The group consensus was they would try to create a tool, a shaped charge tool that could disrupt the device, basically cut it in half. Take the brains and the top box away from the brawn and the bottom box. Scene and gather evidence. After the blast went off, we had a little shock effect as magnitude of this crime scene. Most of the people that we brought to bear to investigate this, myself included, had considerable experience with bombings and post-blast investigations, but nothing of this size. This was complicated by the fact that on a casino floor there were millions of dollars in negotiable instruments, money and casino chips, coins in the machines. All of that had to be recovered and considered while we're searching for evidence. The casino operation wanted to open part of the area, part of their gambling area that was not damaged. And they did build this big wall and put a big picture window in it so that the gamblers could watch the FBI process the crime scene for the next few weeks. From start to finish, this case was a learning experience for everybody. So as bad as it was, although no one was injured, it was really a beneficial training exercise.
Well, what happened with all the cash, the $3 million that the suspects had demanded? Where did all the cash go? What did authorities do to try to fix this situation? Did the FBI and local police try to give these goons the money? Well, here's what happened. The authorities went, they followed instructions left by the bombers, and authorities prepared to deliver ransom to a remote drop location in Northern California. The instructions in the note directed law enforcement to, fly a helicopter, go to a remote mountainous area and drop the money from the air into a specified drop location. Well, this is what the officials did. Authorities actually did prepare $3 million in cash, about $3 million in cash. They put it in a big suitcase or whatever, and that was the amount that was demanded, of course, in the ransom note. So then the money was packed in large bags designed to be dropped from a helicopter. What happened at the drop zone? When authorities flew to the designated location, the helicopter circled the drop area. Agents searched for signals or instructions from the bomber. However, no one appeared to claim the money. Now, where were the criminals while all this was going on? The suspects were not present at the drop zone. Investigators later concluded that the instructions were part of a deliberately complicated ransom scheme. Now, where were the criminals at that time? Where were they actually located? Well, this John Burgess Sr. guy, the chief mastermind, he was way far away in Fresno, California, about hundreds of miles from the Harvey. So he had arranged the instructions so that he did not have to personally appear at the drop location. However, the crooks planned to get away. The ransom instructions were designed so that the helicopter would drop the money, the bomber or accomplices would retrieve it later. This method would have allowed them to avoid direct contact with the police. These guys were totally stupid. These criminals, they didn't know what the heck they were doing. So the bomb exploded, in fact, before any ransom attempt would have succeeded. The suspects never obtained any money. Yay, that's great. So the final outcome, because of the ransom plan, failed. No ransom money was ever paid, like I just said. The bomb destroyed the hotel, and of course there was the investigation that led to the criminals' apprehension. Here's the fascinating story of how the FBI tracked down and captured the suspects. Now, the FBI is famous, of course, for its investigative skills, and the criminals made a major mistake. They made a lot of major mistakes. They were far stupider than they believed. Now, the ransom note included detailed bomb instruction type documents, and investigators traced typewriters evidence, witness statements, purchases of dynamites, and a distinctive van that these clowns used in this alleged extortion attempt. It wasn't alleged, it actually was an extortion attempt. Now, police searched the Burgess home and found bomb materials, wiring diagrams, typed ransom drafts. So yeah, that was enough to go down and track these creeps and put them in the hoosegow, so to speak. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that right away. Based on the information I just provided for you, the FBI made the big arrests on September 18th, 1980, just about 3 weeks after the December 27th bomb blast. So, yeah, there's no way to get away from the FBI. If they're really after you, they're pretty much going to get you. And so they nailed the main suspect, Mr. Burgess. And there's various reports that he was 57 at the time, some say 59. Who cares? He was around that age. And he was identified as a Hungarian immigrant and a Vietnam War veteran who owned a landscaping business in California. Now, according to some reports, he owned a restaurant. Who cares what kind of business he owned? In any event, his business was supposedly struggling at that time. And so this guy planned this so he could keep his business afloat and, make himself a rich man. But that, of course, didn't work out the way he planned. And okay, now where did these arrests occur? Here we go. Yeah, they most of the arrests took place in the Fresno, California area where Burgess lived, and the locations included his home and properties connected with his landscaping business and nearby residences connected to his accomplices. Now, the FBI identified the suspects based on, the bomb design and the ransom note and the distinctive wording, unusual phrasing, and the detailed stuff. Plus, what really was the big nail on the coffin for these creeps was, of course, the dynamite purchase. Where in the heck did they think? Did they think that nobody was going to look and find out where all this dynamite was purchased? Reportedly about 1,000 pounds of dynamite. You're gonna hide that kind of purchase? Well, the FBI traced these explosive purchases and the materials used to make the bomb, and there could be no denying. And then, as kind of a proverbial frosting on the cake, so to speak, there were witnesses' accounts, and they reported suspicious activity involving a large box that contained the bomb, and descriptions of other investigative leads helped focus the investigation. So, yeah, these officials knew exactly what they were looking for. So, like I say, in September, they found the bomb materials, the wiring components, the explosive residue, and the documents for the extortion letters. Yeah, these baboons, they were put behind bars pretty darn quick, and that's a good thing. What you're looking at right now is more FBI information which I have obtained for your observation. And what we're looking at right here is the extortion letter that was written by this bozo guy, the mastermind of this bombing. And I'll be showing you his photo in just a moment. But as you can see here, this is the last letter. This is the last page of this rambling letter that went on for something like 35 or 45 pages. And the whole thing just shows the arrogance of this creep. And he said, to the pilot, this is the message on the last page of the whole letter. The helicopter has to be filled up with gas. Do not come armed with any weapon. Do not bring a shotgun rider. All radio channels will be monitored. You are to have no communication with anyone after you reach the airport. Do not try to be a hero. Arlington is full of them, and they can't even smell the flowers. Follow these orders strictly. You will make 5 stops, none of which will be at an airfield. You will have ample lighting for landing. All sites are fairly level. One has about 2 degrees pitch. There will be a clearance of more than 200 feet radius. We don't want any trouble, but we won't run away if you bring it. Happy landing. Boy, oh boy, what a creep this guy was. You're going to take a look at him right now. What you're looking at right now is a photo of John Burgess. He's the bozo head, the little pea-brain fellow that pulled this whole thing off. The image that you see is the booking photo of this guy. They took him down to a place called Sparks, Nevada to throw him in the slammer, and try to give to him what he had coming. Anyway, the casino employees, when they first opened the box, the suspicious box, they discovered a long typed ransom note attached to the bomb, and it was written by this guy. And it had two purposes. The purpose of the bomb was to demand money and to explain why the bomb could not be disarmed. In fact, the note was shorter than I previously indicated. I think I said it had something like 35 or 45 pages. It was unusually long, according to the FBI. It was about 15 pages, and it was written like a technical manual. This guy was trying to show off, to show what a genius he was, and his ransom demand was for, now get this, $3 million in cash. Ho ho! Yeah, this guy was a little bit greedy, probably too greedy for his own good. And he claimed in his note that the bomb could not be safely moved or disarmed, and that any attempt to tamper with it could destroy the whole building. Wow, okay, it turned out to be true. His threat in the letter turned out to be true, as the FBI would soon find out. And what made the note unusual? Well, unlike most ransom notes, this one contained detailed engineering explanations. Sections of the letter described how the bomb was wired, anti-tamper switches, backup power supplies, triggers that would activate if the device was moved. The bomber essentially boasted that the device, it was so sophisticated. Now, here's an example passage from his note. One section stated, and I'm paraphrasing it for clarity, the bomb is so designed that removal or designing attempts will cause detonation. There is no possible way to disarm it. This statement was partly true. Bomb experts later said the device was extraordinarily difficult to neutralize. And why the note helped catch the bomber. This guy essentially, he wasn't as smart as he thought, as usual for this kind of creep. And the FBI actually used the note to nail the guy, because what they used was their own FBI technology, which is world famous for tracking down creeps like this guy. And the FBI was able to investigate and identify his typing patterns, the phrasing of his words, his technical language, and the paper, the formatting that he used in the letter. So these details, combined with other clues, they eventually led authorities to this guy and his accomplices, the other fellows that were stupid enough to help him. So now this letter is rather famous among FBI folks and FBI historians because they say it reads like an engineering document, but not only that, it includes bomb design explanations, and it reflects the bomber's technical arrogance. Today, the note is often shown in bomb disposal training and criminal investigation courses. Here's a recap of what happened to the three clowns who were involved in this extortion attempt. The first is John Burgess, and he was sentenced to life in prison, died in prison in 1996, ironically on the 16th anniversary of the bombing, and his charges that he was convicted of ranged from extortion to conspiracy. The second person was John Burgess Jr., and he was 23 years old when he was sentenced, and he got about 10 years in prison for charges ranging from conspiracy to, using explosives in a felony. And then there was Dwayne Burgess. He was about 27 when they were all sent into court, and he kind of got off the hook because he cooperated with authorities. I guess those kind of things happen. And so he pretty much got off the hook, and all he received was probation. The casino resort's owner was businessman Harvey Gross, who died in 1983, just 3 years after the blast destroyed his resort. Very sad, of course. And he was a businessman who built Harvey's from a tiny roadside operation into one of the major casinos on Lake Tahoe's South Shore. In fact, he originally worked as a meat wholesaler in Sacramento before entering the casino business. What you're seeing right here on your screen is an actual photo of the Harvey's Casino wagon wheel and gambling hall way back in the 1950s, his original gaming property, casino property. And my parents took me there for a time or two for meals way back then. They had a little tiny diner and they only had a handful of slot machines, maybe three or four. They're kind of amazing. He started small and grew and grew. The key facts about the early casino: it opened in 1944 as a small cabin style gambling hall, and the building expanded rapidly during the 1950s as the tourism boom began to hit the Lake Tahoe area. And by the 1960s, Mr. Gross replaced much of the original structure with the larger Harvey's Resort Hotel complex. Today, the resort is called Harvey's Lake Tahoe Hotel and Casino. But don't forget this: there are also renovation plans to rebrand the property as Caesars Republic Lake Tahoe Hotel and Casino in the coming years. Now, the current owner-operator of the facility is Caesars Entertainment, and the land upon which the hotel sits is the real estate is owned by a casino real estate investment trust, Vici Properties. That's VICI Properties, which leases it to Caesars. And I also feel a great need to mention that the damage from the 1980 explosion was estimated about 18 million. By some estimates, that's the equivalent of roughly 60 to 70 million dollars today, depending on inflation. Hey, full disclosure here on my part, I've got to let you know right here that the biggest contributor to the story that I did for the local newspapers, the Reno Journal and the Gazette, that story, the biggest contributor to the story, did a far better job than I did at reporting the bombing of Harvey's, was the gentleman you see on your screen. His name was Philip Schmoll Barber. Now, Phil Barber was legendary in Northern Nevada journalism, and he was far more experienced than I was at that time, of course, and he did a better job than I did. Got to admit it. I contributed to the story. I did my share. I think I did okay, maybe even a little bit superior and commendable, but the exceptional job went to the man you see on your screen. This is a picture of him from his obituary way back in June of 2024. The obituary appeared, but he had died, of course, as you see on your screen, on May 5th of 2024, just a few days past his 100th birthday, and he did a phenomenal job. He had an illustrious career as a journalist. In fact, he was, in my mind, a hero during World War II. He fought bravely against the Nazis in the skies over Italy, and he did a great job. And when he moved and he was hired by the Reno Gazette-Journal after working for various news services in Central California, we were lucky to have him on our staff. And he was among my mentors, among the people that taught me how to do a better job. And I looked up to him as a model person that I could model myself after. So I just have to mention Phil right here. There's no way I can get around it. And bless his soul, he was a wonderful guy and a true professional. Well, as you might very well imagine, the bombing of Harvey's Casino way up in Lake Tahoe almost 50 years ago, people are still talking about it every now and then. It's a matter of topic and discussion for historians. And as I previously indicated, it's a big topic for criminal investigators about how it all came about, how the crime was solved. And, it's just fun to look back at after all these years. And I hope you enjoyed this journey. And we're going to be taking more journeys along with me on my channel.